Well, welcome to our live streaming broadcast tonight. I'm Andrew Wommack, and I've got Lance Wallnau here with us, and we are at the Lodge in Woodland Park at our Charis Bible College, and we have some awesome news to share with you tonight. Matter of fact, Lance, we got so much to cover.
Yep.
We're going to have to discipline ourselves to get through it.
We will.
But let me just say quickly that there may be, I guess we're hosting this, there may be some people that don't know you, so we need to give a brief introduction.
Yes.
Who are you?
I'm Lance. And so I basically have been working with businesses and government lately. But about 10 years ago, I started talking about 7 mountains of culture that would change the world.
Now, you have pastored for how many years?
Pastored for 20 years before that.
But then you got to talking about taking it outside of the church and getting involved in our culture.
Yeah.
And that led you to what?
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's interesting is I resisted that because I felt that I had left the business world to go into ministry. And my paradigm was that there was a hard wall between the spiritual and the secular, and I wanted to be full tilt for Jesus. So I went so strong into the ministry that it literally took dragging me out into United Nations meetings and campus stuff until I realized that the Lord wanted me to go as a missionary into the systems. So that was the evolution that really launched, a lot of what brings us around to what the Truth and Liberty network
let me
is.
just say before we get right into that you are really anointed. You think differently than I do. It's like, I don't know, left brain, right brain or something, but you'll approach the same thing and we have the same concepts, the same values, but you just come at it from a unique position. It's awesome what God's anointed you to do, and you have an anointing in this area of politics, I guess, or culture. I don't know which would be the proper way to say it.
Yeah, and I don't even know either, which is why we created that whole 7 mountain metaphor, because I don't know where the spirit realm stops, because the kingdom goes over it all. Jesus is Lord of it all.
So let's bring it up to about, 3 years ago that I first met you, and you came and spoke at one of our business summits.
Yeah.
And it was just supernatural when we got together, not only you, but Billy Epperhart, Paul Milligan, Dean Radke, Karen Conrad, and we were all speaking. And I mean, there was a synergy that happened that was not normal. It was like there was an anointing on it.
There totally was. And what's interesting is I had heard about you, but I had people that started to prophesy, and it was an unusual thing, that to pay attention to what you're doing and that I needed to meet you. And I thought, well, then I had people come to my meetings that said, you and Andrew are like complementary to each other because you're talking about going out and he gets you grounded in the truth. So when I met you, it was, my expectation was, well, we'll see where this goes. But the Lord was in it because the team that you've got is such a diverse team of people with different backgrounds that you really have here in Charis. The arts community, you've got like Broadway quality production stuff going on. You've got the School of Government, you have David Barton working with you. And I realized, wait a second, this is like an incubator for teaching on the whole idea of how the gospel goes into every system around the world.
And did you know, when I first met you, I didn't know that you were famous for 7 Mountains teaching. And I had never heard it. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. But without having any teaching, the Holy Spirit had prompted me that we needed to take these people and not just put them in pulpits, but we needed to get them out into society. So we've got government school, we've got business school, we've got the arts and entertainment, as well as the religion and missions and all of these things. So the concepts were there, but we came at it from 2 totally different directions.
That's what's beautiful about it. So there's a synergy in this, which is the idea. And like you said, there is an anointing that happened when we had the business people and you were teaching. And I keep including you in it because you want to pull yourself out and say, well, I don't do what you guys do. But your faith and grace message creates the kind of gravy that holds everything together so that people can then be secure in the truth and then advance into the system.
I think that's the first time I've ever been referred to as gravy.
Well,
so anyway, we could just give introduction forever, but let me say that this synergy happened. We said, we've got to do something. So the next year, we had another business summit. We hadn't done anything. And we said, we got to do something. So we finally got together in the summer of 2017, right here in this room in our lodge. Right. And we just started praying and said, what is happening? And out of this, the Lord spoke to us that we needed to take all of our ministries. And since that time, and again, this was Lance and myself, Karen Conrad, Billy Epperhart, Paul Milligan, and each one of us have different realms of influence. Right. But we said we need to have a coalition and bring everybody together and start using this to advance the gospel in our secular culture. Since that time, David Barton, Randy Forbes, a number of others, many people are coming together. And what we have done, we've come up with a Truth and Liberty Coalition. And that's what we're announcing tonight. This is the very first time that we've promoted. I think I mentioned it, but the first time it's been promoted. And we want to share with you what the goal of this is and some things. We have a website, and we're going to be referring to this throughout the night. But let me just mention that this website is truthandliberty.net. And if you will go there, we're doing a number of things. We don't have the website to where it's fully functional, but we have things so that you can see it. And some of the things we have on there, we're going to be talking about a number of things that you will not hear anywhere else that I'm aware of.
Right.
And we're going to have it on there. You can go there and download it at truthandliberty.net. But also, we're giving away some product. I'm giving away my book. This is 800 and something pages, and Lance is giving away his book. Look how puny it is.
That is. However, this one...
It's like a stick of dynamite. It's powerful.
Yeah, this one was written before Donald Trump was president. I had a guy in Washington call me and said, most people talk about how they predicted Trump would be president after he's elected. You published while he was 15 points down and was supposed to lose. So
I remember when you came out with saying he was going to be like a wrecking ball. I don't even think Trump believed he was going to win back then.
It was a shock. You see the pictures of them in Trump Towers, and they were shocked because they were told everywhere that it was going to be hard for him to come back and win.
So we're going to be talking about things that we have to offer. What we're going to do is be like a clearinghouse, a place that you can go so that you can find out how to get involved and how to make a difference. And we're going to be talking about all of these things this evening. But real quickly, you just need to let them know that God gave you this word about Trump being a Cyrus.
Absolutely.
And there's some things that happened today that just fit with this. And this happened before... I guess there was probably still 15 people running on the Republican ticket when we got that.
There were 15 contenders that were running for president and running for the party nomination. And when I met Donald Trump, the second time I met him, I had told one of the preachers in the room, Darrell Scott, who works with the president, and I told him that the Lord told me the next president will be Isaiah 45. And I looked it up and it said Cyrus. And I started reading and saying, I got to get my head wrapped around Cyrus because it says that Cyrus is anointed. Cyrus actually was the key to delivering Israel from its bondage. And then it went on to say, though he doesn't know me. And I thought, man, this is... So I talked to Darrell and told him preacher to preacher. I think I heard the Lord on this. This man, Donald Trump, we're meeting, is actually the Cyrus that God's going to elect as the 45th president. He's going to put him in. I never expected him to say to Donald Trump in front of a whole room full of people, I want you to hear this. And he calls me to give him the word. And I'm going, what part? He said, tell him what you told me. I said, what part?
Had you met him before that?
I had met him once before. But this is my second meeting. And, I didn't want to be the fanatic with the Bible, prophesying. But that's what I was. So I delivered the word of the Lord to him. And he came up to me after that, which was kind of funny because he doesn't speak Christianese. And so, if you wanted to say that really ministered to me or blessed me, he comes up to me and goes, that really, he didn't know what to say. He said, meant a lot. I said, thank you.
But that's fresh. He doesn't have all of the religious stuff. When he says something like that, you can tell.
No, he doesn't. And here's the funny thing that happened today. So today I'm getting, my phone's burning up because I'm getting this left. I always get covered by the left wing. You do too. But I get the left wing people because their Vox publication is saying the biblical story Christian right uses to defend Trump. So this Cyrus story, especially with Cyrus, the Sanhedrin just put Donald Trump's face along Cyrus's and issued a coin commemorating him as a modern day. This is the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem.
That's a real coin?
That's a real silver coin.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
the temple just issued it. So Vox is saying, what is it with these evangelicals and the Cyrus thing? So they're going down and they're finding out, this is like Lance Wallnau is this guy that says it. And they're trying to explain how delusional, people like me are, because we think we heard God talk. And while this is coming out, Benjamin Netanyahu is in the White House saying, thank you, Mr. President, you are a modern day Cyrus. While they're telling me I'm delusional, Netanyahu
There
is
it
telling
is confirmed.
So it's the same day. So we're on to something, people. What we're doing is prophetic. I really believe that.
And Lance, this isn't really about endorsing a candidate or a person. What this is, it's just a coalition of Christians that are tired of letting our nation be taken over by the ungodly that are putting forth everything that is completely contrary to Scripture, and it's time for us to stand up. And I know that the people watching, they have a desire to do this, but they lack the information, they lack the platform, and this is what it's all about. And we are drawing Christians together, not only Spirit-filled, but evangelicals, people from every walk of life, and we are going to be putting things on this website that will enable you to find out where people stand on issues. We will be putting forth information. Like, let's share some of this information that we had today that came from the Treasury Department. Do you remember that?
Do you have the numbers from Paul on that?
I do. I've got it on my
right.
phone, if nothing else.
All right, well,
It might be
while
in
we're looking for that, I wanted to share something else. The thing that's happening in the United States is relevant to the whole world, because we have people that we want to be part of this that are in Australia and they're in Europe, and we just came back from in the UK. I just did a fascinating tour of activity in the UK and met with a lot of Charis people there in the school, and it was such a rich tapestry of diversity. You have a German director of the Bible school, a Scottish guy who's his assistant, and he was married to an English woman. I mean, it was amazing. The diversity was entertaining. But what I'm realizing is the Truth and Liberty Coalition is about what God's doing in the nations. And my take on Donald Trump isn't about politics at all in terms of party. It's about that's why I call him God's chaos candidate. Because it's like God put somebody in my opinion, who's a disruption to the corruption that exists in the system of American politics. Donald Trump didn't get in because he's a Republican. He went in because the people want something different. And he drew a lot of Democrats. We have to remember
there
there's
was
a lot of
Republicans that were opposed to him
even the dossier, this whole thing we're hearing about, this Russia dossier, was originally funded by Republicans. And then then the Republicans said, oh, forget it. And the Democrats said, well, we'll use it. So it's like they both wanted to conspire against. It's like Herod and the Jews in Israel conspiring, so to speak, against what God was doing with Jesus. But this is a global movement. This is a global movement, and what's happening in America is important, because if America can get through this chapter, it's going to have ramifications for the reformation of nations all over the world. This is a coalition for everyone watching, not just for America.
And so let me mention that today, this just came out through nsnews.com. And these are some of the things that we're going to be putting on the website. And one of the things we want to do is just to empower you with information, because our major media sources today are anti-Trump. They are twisting and spinning things. I think Trump has correctly called them the fake news. And so anyway, where do you go to find these things out? This is one of the things we're going to have on our website tonight. Remember that you can go to truthandliberty.net. You can sign up. You give us your email address. And as this thing rolls out, we're going to be sending you things that will enable you. But right now, this is one thing that just came out through nsnews.com. And it says the federal government this January ran a surplus while collecting record total tax revenue for that month of the year, according to the monthly Treasury statement released today. Now remember, this is the very first month that the reduced taxes that Trump pushed through went into effect. And the very first month it was in effect, they had the record tax collection in history.
Stop and think about that. Record tax. And what was the major point made against Donald Trump's tax program? Was that it was going to increase the deficit.
Which is funny to me because the Democrats have increased the deficit more under Obama, I guess, than in the whole history of the United States. And yet now they're screaming about the deficit.
And what does this tell you? It tells you that Trump was right. Well, here's what Trump said. He said, all right, it may look like there's an increased deficit, but the amount of money I'm going to bring in through the taxes, new taxes, through the American economy flourishing, will more than compensate for what we're losing. And the first month proved him right.
And here's the facts. During January, the Treasury collected approximately $361 billion in total tax revenue and spent a total of approximately $311.8 billion to run a surplus of approximately $49,236 million surplus the first month that the tax cuts went into effect. Despite the monthly surplus, they were predicting that the year as a whole would go in a negative because we started with a $224.9 billion deficit that we entered the year with. But the man who sent me this report said that he figured it out, and at this rate, we actually would turn a tax surplus or an income surplus in the U.S. in 2018 if it continues.
If it continues?
Yes, sir.
Who would want to sabotage the prosperity of a system like this?
Well, I can tell you there's some people that would, just to keep themselves in power, because if all of this stuff is true, they're going to be voted out. And so they would do it just for power.
So for the sake of power, people would be willing to even sabotage something.
Did you know I just read a quote today from George Washington in his first inaugural address, and he says it doesn't matter what system you have, how pure it is, how well put together it is, if you put people in there who are with a fallen human nature and power and greed comes to play, he says they can pervert it and change it, and that is exactly what we see happening. I believe we've got the best system that the world has ever seen put into our government, and yet it's being co-opted today because of people who they're wanting, we need to drain the swamp. There's a lot of critters in that swamp.
There's a lot of criticism. And we need, and listen, this is so important, believers need to be awake, because it's while men slept, an enemy was able to get mischief done.
All right, now we need to get into some specifics, but real quickly, let me just say that you can post your questions on live chat. You can go give your questions on Facebook. You can text your questions to 954-800-AWMI. That's 954-800-AWMI. And we are going to try and answer some of these questions. But we now want to just show you what God has led us to do. And we are putting together this coalition. One of the main parts of it is going to be this website, truthandliberty.net. And right now, today is the first day it's up. So it's got bare minimum information. But these stats that I just gave you from the Treasury Department, that's one of the things you're going to have on there. And that's something that just came out today. And see, this is the kind of thing we're going to be doing. As we get this information, we're going to post it on there, and you are going to have talking points and information that will allow you to counter all of this negative stuff that is being said. And I think that this is going to become a resource for you that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, there's a study that says that the number one reason why Christians don't defend their worldview is not because they don't believe in their worldview, it's because they haven't thought through how to present it. And so it's the awkwardness of how to make the argument, how to make the statement that holds people back.
Yeah, I've just been watching Josh McDowell because I'm doing a teaching on worldview. And he called people up out of the audience one after the other, and he says, do you believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God? And every one of them, yes. Why do you believe it? Give me a reason. And they couldn't, not a one of them could give him an answer. They believed it, but they didn't have the information. And that's the way that a lot of people are. They know that the way the nation has been going is wrong. They are optimistic that maybe we are moving in a good direction. But again, we're being bombarded with things completely contrary to everything I believe that's reality. Right. And without information, we're going to be influenced by all of this
That's
negative
right.
stuff.
And I was studying where Peter says, "Be ready to give an answer for the hope that is in you." And the way that actually works out in the language is that there is be ready to give an answer or to give a logismos or a logical explanation for the hope. Because sometimes we that are supernaturally oriented, we know it's real because it's an experience, but you can't make that the argument. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to explain it in such a way that a person who doesn't have the experience goes, "Oh, I see." Yep. So what's the logismos? What's the logic behind our hope for the future? And if Christians aren't informed, then in that vacuum, the enemy can take advantage and actually sow doubts into people. I mean, sure. I'm always on a crusade to try to help Christians celebrate what God's doing in America right now because they aren't even aware God did something.
Yeah. Let's go through some of these things. And this is another thing that is on our website tonight. You can go to this truthandliberty.net, and this is already there, and you can see this. But I think this is 5 pages worth of accomplishments that have happened in the first year of Trump's presidency. And again, the reason for doing this is just to counter this negativism, to give us some ammunition to say that, we are seeing some things turn around. And I think that this will be a real help to people.
Let's dig it. We already heard the economic turnaround, but the stock market had 60 record-breaking sets in the first year of the president's administration, which is absolutely phenomenal. Unemployment in the United States is at its lowest rate, 4.1%, the lowest in 17 years.
And during the State of the Union message by Trump, I remember him saying that the black unemployment rate was the lowest in history, and you would have thought that they would have applauded that, but all of the black caucus sat there and refused to. I think one person clapped. But boy, you talk about partisan. They can't even rejoice at the lowest black unemployment rate in the history of this nation.
And I think that's a mistake to do that because it reveals that there's a discontent that can't even necessarily be solved by prosperity.
And so he's created 1.7 million new jobs in the first year of Trump's deal. The unemployment rate, you've mentioned that. The stock market, $6 trillion worth of gross domestic product. It's increased tremendously.
It's literally it's an economic renaissance, which is baffling in a sense because there is no new business necessarily that's already started. It's just the fact that Donald Trump represents someone who is going to turn it around, and it's about confidence in the market.
And it's not only that, but there are so many regulations. Like I heard that to get a road approved, it takes like 10 years of permits and studies. I had a friend that actually was building a bridge to access his business, and it was costing him $1 million to build this bridge, but it was delayed for 2 years because there was some kind of it was a rat that lived under that bridge that they thought might be there. And he had to build
an endangered species.
$1 million tunnel under his $1 million bridge with 2 years worth of government interaction for this rat so that he could cross and not get run over. So, one of the things that Trump promised was that he would take away 2 regulations for every one that he put into place. And the actual statistics are that he took away 22 regulations for every one new regulation.
Which, listen to this, that means those 22 regulations represent $8 billion that has been actually saved, and $8 billion that's been added to the taxes.
And so this is one of the reasons that the economy has bloomed, is not only the tax benefits and stuff, but just the restraints that have been on the economy that have choked it have been removed. That's been one of the big factors.
Yeah, 70% of the American economy, we always look at the big businesses in Wall Street. 70% of the American economy is driven by small businesses of 5 people or less. There's a lot of folks that are watching this that they're part of that small business. They're 3 employees or a bookkeeper and a husband and wife. But 70% of the economy is driven by that. And that's where the regulations have been choking America.
Yep.
It's the engine of the entrepreneur that wants to do something, and they're being blocked because they have to go through all these. Trump is clearing that out.
And so one of the things that happened, Ford canceled plans to build a $1.6 billion plant in Mexico, and rather is investing $700 million in their Ohio plant, which is forecast to create 700 new jobs. So that right there jumpstarts the economy. And then the same thing happened with Exxon, Hyundai, Apple, Chrysler, Toyota, and on you could go, just a few of the companies. It's made a huge impact already. And let's go back to some of these other things concerning faith and religion. At the Values Voters Summit, he declared an end to the war on Judeo-Christian values. I think that's significant.
Now think about this. Had Ted Cruz become president, Mike Huckabee, Ben Carson, any Christian evangelical who became president could never say that they're declaring the war on Judeo-Christian values is ending, because they would have been jumped on
Absolutely.
for confusing their religion with their
That's
political.
absolutely.
But the genius of God is that no one accuses Donald Trump of being a Christian.
That's right. And you know what? He wouldn't have been my choice, probably. Matter of fact, he wasn't my first choice. But in retrospect, I can see the wisdom my guy would not have had the backbone. He wouldn't have stood up and have addressed these things because of the very reasons.
Imagine if one of the evangelicals said, "We're moving the embassy to Jerusalem." Oh, there would have been a meltdown. There's a meltdown on Trump anyway, but if it had been a religious leader doing it, it would have been Armageddon.
Yep, I can see the supernatural wisdom of God.
Totally.
Also, the Johnson Amendment, he took that away, but then the Senate stripped that from the Tax Act. But Trump still has said that he issued an executive order saying that they aren't going to enforce this against people's religious convictions.
That really upsets me. You know what upsets me? I was in the meeting in New York where Donald Trump had to schmooze 1,000 evangelical broadcasters and leaders. And he had his speech. And he went in there kind of nervously, because now he's going really into the arena. And these are all the diehard Cruz and other people, other fans. And they're all kind of like staring at him. And he comes in. And one of the first things he leads with is, I could be in my office at Trump Towers, and anyone could be on a soapbox. I could see him on the street below, except one group of people can't be on a soapbox and say what they want to say, and that's pastors. They're the only people that are gagged from having an opinion. That has to stop. I am all for repealing the Johnson Amendment. Now here's the amazing moment. Andrew, I sat there, and there was silence. Now when I repeat the story in churches and conferences, Christians, like this, but the leaders, silent. And he looked at it and thought it was strange. He thought for sure this was going to go over big, because the number one thing he noticed in ministers that talked to him was the fear of the government persecuting them. So I have this awareness now that it's got to be the grassroots that is pushing this thing, because not everybody's like you, and I know they're not like me. They really don't want to have opinions on controversial subjects.
They like staying inside their four walls and staying out of the fray.
That's exactly right. So when the Senate, the Senate majority right now is Republican. Supposedly, the evangelicals party, they're the ones that allowed the Johnson Amendment to be gutted out because there wasn't enough zeal on the part of the church to be free to have an opinion.
And Lance, let's go back to what you said. Trump said that everybody can stand on a soapbox except pastors. You made a statement about that, some people might view what we're doing right here as you shouldn't be doing this, but you made the statement about Jesse Jackson and
oh, no, without a doubt.
With all of these other guys, that if they come after us, they would have to shut down all of these other people that have been on the other side preaching politics from their pulpit for generations.
There's a completely uneven playing field. If in the left there's a merger of reverends and politics, in the right there is an anxiety about a reverend and a politician. So the level playing field is that the Word of God applies to all of life, and that includes the matters that affect morality, marriage, gender, economics, and freedom. So we can't be silent.
Amen. So anyway, there's other things. We'll let you go to our website and download this and get all of the details. But you know, something that is minor is Trump went back to wishing a very Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays, which is a symbolic thing. But man, I just appreciate a guy standing up and refusing to go with the political correctness. I appreciate it. It's created a different atmosphere.
And I don't think it can be said fast enough that we have an immigration crisis. Europe has been literally devastated by millions of North African immigration into, and a lot of it's Muslim and not assimilated into Europe. Germany's in a crisis. But what President Obama created by allowing a vacuum in the Middle East, Donald Trump within his first year literally reduced 98% of ISIS territory in the first year.
Pretty awesome.
98%. They've been so emaciated that they went from 45,000 and growing every year to now 1,000 scattered all over Syria.
That's awesome.
Done. Bam.
And not only with ISIS, but with North Korea. I hate to think what would have happened if the other candidate would have won and have been in there when North Korea began to flex their muscles and said they were going to send a missile to Guam, and Trump stood his ground.
Oh my gosh, you know what he did? He told them. And here's the interesting thing. He let China know that he was going to fire. And if they did that, it was all bets are off. He's going in. And I believe China, through the back door, said, chill to
He
North
also
Korea.
put sanctions on China and Russia so that they could not support and prop up North Korea.
Yeah. You know what amazes me? It amazes me how the press continues with, while we're on the subject, the whole Russian narrative regarding Trump. Because last week, what you don't hear in the news, and I hear it because he always says something incendiary and outrageous. And every now and then I get the quote because I become the apologist for him. It's like, what do you think about this? But last week it was hilarious. He was doing a meeting with the Australian Prime Minister. And he says this, by the way, Syria, humanitarian situation, Russia, Iran, and Syria, a total disgrace, all three of those nations. Russia, he names them again, Russia, Iran, Syria, disgrace. The way they're handling this humanity. We go in because there's an issue we have to deal with. What they're doing is a disgrace. And I thought, this is like stunning because normally the State Department has nuanced language they use.
That doesn't look like collusion, does it?
No, not only does it not look like collusion, but what do you think that message is to Iran, Russia, and Syria regarding adventuring and testing the resolve of America? They already know. They don't know that they don't trust this guy, that he's got a hair trigger, which, by the way, is how you keep your enemies off balance.
And that's how you minister to people that only understand force. They don't have the same values that we do, and they will lie to you and do anything to advance their cause. Let me mention here that also for pro-life stuff that President Trump passed legislation that state governments could withhold funding from organizations like Planned Parenthood that performed abortions. And this basically was in total opposition to what Obama did during his entire time that he was in. And that's big.
It is big. And in fact, I did not know till Richard Harris. That's the guy that's helping this on your team.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. Man, I did not know. I was reading this today, and I'm going, folks, I'm immersed in this subject and didn't know this. So as much as I know we've got to do this truth and liberty, we have to do it because you have to know what the truth is.
So he not only has allowed states to defund Planned Parenthood, but he's also stopped the U.S. funds to the UN to go to UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, which basically is a large promoter of abortion, the same as China's coerced abortion policy. And so anyway, a lot of things. He's supporting the Life Begins at Conception, which many of you may not know this. And see, this is, again, one of the reasons that we want this Truth and Liberty Coalition, because I didn't realize this until just last year. And I have been standing against abortion and fighting for it. I've started 3 pregnancy centers in this area. We closed one Planned Parenthood office in Colorado Springs, and we decreased the abortion rate in El Paso County, Colorado, by half, and the abortion rate in Colorado by 1/3. And we've got front page articles that verify all that. So I've been fighting abortion for decades, And I just learned last year that in the Roe versus Wade decision, there is a clause that says this whole decision is based on the fact that they don't know when life begins. And it says if someone could prove that life begins at conception, Roe versus Wade is null and void. And at the time they passed Roe versus Wade, I think in 1973, they didn't have that science, but now they do. And science has proven that life begins at conception. They've got all of these things. And so there is a motion in front of Congress right now called Life at Conception. And if that was to be passed, and it's sponsored by more congressmen than any bill has ever been sponsored, it's got a wide foundation for it. If that gets passed, it automatically rescinds Roe versus Wade, which would be huge. And see, this is some of the stuff that we're putting on our Truth and Liberty Coalition website. You need to go and find out this information and act accordingly.
And while you're talking about the courts and the importance of courts, everybody knows about the Supreme Court choice that Donald Trump did, which again quelled all the anxieties people had. Will he be a conservative president? He picked the most conservative appointment he could. But here's what we've got written here. Confirmation of one Supreme Court justice and 12 judges for the U.S. Federal Courts of Appeals is more than any other president in history during the first year of office.
Now, those are the ones who've been approved. But he's got how many others? 47 other judges that he's appointed that are awaiting confirmation.
And you know what that means? That the Democrats are holding up, be honest about it, approval of conservative nominees until after the midterms. Because if they can turn the tide in the House and in the Senate in the midterms, they can overrule any future appointments. And the importance of the judiciary is that Donald Trump's he's his second year. It's hard to believe. It's like almost 2 years coming up. The president's only there for 4 years, but these judges are there for life.
And he's appointing young judges who will be there for generations.
That's right. So if the wrong judges are in, it is a slow process trying to change anything.
And here's another thing, Lance, that I wasn't aware of, that there was what was called the blue slip thing, where a person that was appointed to, was it just the Supreme Court? Let me look at this. Any nominee, if they were appointed, the senator from their home state had to give them a pass or they would automatically be refused. So in other words, this would allow a person to reject any of these nominees, and in a sense they could have a veto power over the whole process, and Trump did away with that, which has made it infinitely easier for nominees to be approved.
Wow.
And see, that's something that most people aren't aware of. I wasn't aware of, but he's just taken away a lot of these things. The swamp, he's draining the swamp, and some of these things are getting through that wouldn't have ever made it otherwise.
The number of executive orders that Donald Trump has initiated has been, since, I think, we were looking at some data, it's exceeded any other president since Harry Truman in terms of the aggressiveness. He's signed 53 bills into law.
And much of that executive orders was undoing the executive orders of Obama.
Exactly. Which,
even though that's a victory, in the long run, we need congressional action on it, because the next president could come in and undo his executive orders.
Well, this is the problem. The problem is the church, you that are listening, the church in the United States can determine if this is a window or a door. If what God's doing is a window, the window can close. If it's a door, it opens up a new chapter. Mm-hmm. We have got to treat this thing as something urgent, because this is fragile. This can all be undone because of the nature of the way that the Founding Fathers set it up, is that this is a delicate apparatus of government that reflects the will of the people. And so the challenge is, the statistics we were looking at is an incumbent president typically loses 25 seats in the midterms, and if their approval rating is under 35%, they can lose up to 50 seats.
Let me say that we've got 3 more pages of things that we were going to point out.
I know, there's so much good.
But it's going to be on our website. Go to truthandliberty.net. Remember that when you sign up, not only can you get this information, you can get that statistics about the Treasury and how that they've had the largest tax collection in history for the month of January since the tax cuts went into being. You can not only get all of that, but you can register and you can win a signed copy of my book on the book of Proverbs, which is 800 and something pages.
Yes,
How many
and you can get my incisive 146 pages, prophetically dealing with the future and accurately calling Donald Trump.
And so we're going to give those away to someone that we just choose to bless. So you can get all of this information. But Lance, what we need to do now, you were building up to it, is all of these things that have happened are fragile unless the midterm elections are followed through. And we were talking with Randy Forbes and David Barton, and Randy Forbes, deals in the political realm and has helped many people get elected.
Brilliant.
And he said that the number one comment that he hears from officials after they're elected is that, where did all my support go? He never hears from them. People elect them. They think that that's all they had to do was vote, and they never hear from them again. But the opposition is in constant contact. So what this means is that during these midterm elections, we've got to take a stand. And we've got to turn out the vote. And this is one of the things we're wanting to do with our Truth and Liberty Coalition is we are going to give you information. Matter of fact, we've got a place right on I don't know if it's on our screen, but I know it's on our website. Let me get this for you. And I think they'll put it on the screen, but we've got a place that you can go and click, and it will take you, you put in your address or zip code, and it will take you to exactly where you need to go to find out how to get involved in the process, involved in the primaries, where to vote, and all of this. And see, we want to do this and be like a clearinghouse, that if you have some need that you can go there, you can find this information, and we want to help.
Because the sad thing is, and this is something that Donald Trump told me when I first met him, he said, I don't think you, meaning Christians, know how much power you have if you ever got in unity.
Absolutely.
He said there isn't a rule, a law, a thing you want to challenge that you couldn't deal with if you ever got it together. He said, and then he said this, he said, that's not my job. He said, that's your job. He said, my job is to get you Supreme Court appointments that are going to carry your values. He said, but your job is really to figure out how to get together.
So Lance, let's expound on this a little bit, because the primaries are going to be starting. They file, and they, like for instance, we're having our caucus in Colorado March the 6th. I guess that's tomorrow.
Yep.
Is that right?
And right, and Texas just had their early voting.
So anyway, we're just now getting these primaries going. And here's the good news, is that the primaries only, usually it's like 10 to 15, 20% max of the voting population determines these primaries.
It's a shocking statistic to realize that a couple of 100 or 1,000 believers can shape who goes into the election process if they just get engaged.
Yeah. And Lance, I don't know how many people are watching right now. I'm sure somebody's pulling statistics on this, but I know that we did a little promo this afternoon, and you put it on your, what, Periscope?
Yeah, I did it on Facebook.
And I think there was, 7,000 people in just an hour's time?
Right.
Did you know if we got 7,000 people involved, we could change many of these primaries? So in one way, it's bad that people don't participate, but on the other hand, it makes it so that, you feel like, what can I do? What can my vote or my participation do? These primaries are critical. And if people get involved, you could make a huge difference. And this is one of the things we want to get across.
And this is the year of the remnant. I mean, what happened even with the election itself was shocking, because it was 5 swing states with a total of less than a couple of 100,000 votes that made the difference between where the Electoral College went. This is Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. And you know what? It was, and my research says, it was last minute believers who didn't know what to do that showed up and made a choice. And literally, they became that remnant that decided the Electoral College in 5 swing states. It wasn't the big states. It was the little ones. It was almost the non-consequential ones that determined the history.
So this is a great opportunity for everybody to get involved. And on the primary level, you can make a huge impact. Then, when the November elections come, this is the midterm elections. And Lance, do you have that paper? I didn't bring it with me that showed the Senate seats that are up.
Check it out.
Do you have that?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so here it is. 25 of the 34 seats that are up for re-election are defended by Democrats, and 10 of those are in states won by Donald Trump. Did you know we have an opportunity?
Think of it.
To change some things. Right now, we have a 49 to what, 51?
51. We're squeaking ahead by like 2, and they're not all real strong Republicans either.
And they aren't all voting for moral issues.
No.
And so if we were to lose any of those seats,
Can't.
this may be an overstatement, but I heard David Barton say this, and I put a lot of stock in what he said. He actually believes that we could see, if we were to lose the Senate, he believes that they would push to impeach
Oh, no doubt about
President Trump. That's how much they hate him.
He is so, well, because as you could see in the State of the Union address, when there was like just a resistance to even celebrating anything, they will impeach the president. And theirs was worse. They'll do it not because of Russian collusion. The Mueller investigations left that. That train left the station. They're now indicting Russians. They can't find anyone in Trump's administration. They're going after Russians. That's a brilliant strategy. But what they're after now is any business dealing, Andrew, that any of Donald Trump's associates have ever done, they're going after financial history in order to find a technicality. And they will push a technicality because you know what? If your intent is evil, you don't need a big rationalization. You just need an excuse.
So what we're trying to say is that even though we've been listing all of these things, good things that have been happening for people who love God and who love this country, it's fragile and it could all be undone. It could be reversed in a heartbeat in the midterm elections. So if you think that getting out and voting in the 2017, when was it?
2016 yeah.
Elections, if you think that was important, I guarantee you these 2018 elections are going to actually be more important because it could undo everything and actually reverse it. And if we miss this window of opportunity, Lance, I think that this may be our last chance on this.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And the one thing that you can do, you that are watching, is 50% of Christians are not even registered to vote. Imagine that. 50%, half of the body of Christ isn't even participating in the elections. So the first thing you can do is, if you're one of those people that said, well, I don't really think that was relevant, you need Truth and Liberty. Go to the site because we actually help give instructions on how to start the process. And it's not just you. Just ask a few friends. Don't attack them. Just say, did you vote? Do you ever vote? And if they say, well, sometimes not, make sure they're registered. You have to do it.
Yeah. So if you go to that Truth and Liberty, you're not only going to get this Treasury report, you're going to get these 5 pages of good, positive things that have happened in the first year of Trump's administration. And I don't know if we will have this up tonight, but within a very short period of time, we are going to have this information about that there's 100 senators, they have 6-year terms, 34 seats are up for election. There are 9 of them that are battleground that we, the Republicans, have a very good chance of winning. And if they did, man, we could get some things through that have not been pushed through.
And the challenge is, and this is just the way it is, the left, because of media, because of the incendiary, toxic negativity, is riled up. So you see, whoever has the most energy usually carries this. And what are Christians? I'm sorry to say, we've become passive. We become, disengaged. The left is mobilized. And so far in every one of the elections that's happened, special elections, the left has succeeded because they get their agitated people to show up. And a lot of other folks are just saying, Well,
there's a lot of Christians that think, well, we elected Trump now, and we've got a majority in Congress, and we've got it.
And you know what?
And that is not the case.
We almost don't. No, I won't say it. But you know what? You can have what you're willing to steward, and if you can't steward wealth, God doesn't give it to you. You teach this. the Lord will appraise what you did with the talents, and He redistributes based upon faithfulness. And we have to be faithful with the gifts that God gave us in America, or we will watch a redistribution. It won't be to our favor.
Yeah. So again, we want you to go to that website and get these 5 pages of positive things that have been happening that you are not going to hear through the national media. You can get this report from the Treasury Department. You can get an idea of what we're going to have. We've got 7 mountains there, these areas of influence in our society. And let me also say this, we're getting close to the end of this broadcast. But my ministry has been the one that put the website together, and we are putting some energy and some things into it. And I'm glad to do that, but I've just got a million other things I'm doing. Eventually, we are going to need to fund this. So in the future, we are going to have some kind of a subscription to this, and I'm not sure what it'll be, $5 or $10 a year or something like that. It's not going to be a large subscription, but right now it's free. We are just trying to get it going. We're trying to get you aware of it. Remember that if you go there and if you sign up, that you can actually register to win this awesome 813-page book, or this little wimpy 140
prophetically accurate book.
And we will be giving those out to someone, and it'll be a blessing. We also will take your email address, and we will start sending things to you as we get this up and going. Again, This is the very first day.
And by the way, and this is worth it just for this, the President Trump's, that's the fireplace shooting in the background, by the way.
It's not guns.
It's not guns, thank you, Jesus. But the President's 2 trips, this is great. This is bonus stuff you guys have to read. The first time a president took off, he's made more meetings with heads of state than any president in American history. But he goes to Saudi Arabia.
That's during the first year.
During the first year. He goes to Saudi Arabia and then Israel.
Yeah.
You just got to stop and think about this. A president of the United States goes right into the middle of the Middle East and aligns the Middle East around him as a strong leader dealing with good and evil. And they get it. And so he affects, boom, the Middle East dynamic, goes to Israel and says, by the way, then he puts the embassy there in Jerusalem. This is a Cyrus type
And did you
thing.
know that there's a friend of mine who is a Muslim who was sent over here as a jihadist? He was trained to do it, and he got born again here. You know him.
I met him last week. It was crazy.
And I was just talking to him last week, and he was telling me things that are going on behind the scenes in Saudi Arabia. And of course, that is a very strict Muslim country. But the king that is in place there now is beginning to change.
Ben Suleiman. I love this guy. I'm praying for him. Pray for him.
Because of that, Trump has capitalized on this, and we have the potential to see some real significant changes in the Middle East.
Andrew,
That's awesome.
I hate to say it. With 7 minutes, we have to take a question. Because I know they've been sending them in. I could feel it. It's almost like I could feel it.
All right, let me read. I hadn't even been looking at them. We've been talking so much. All right, so here's one from Dave and Cynthia, and they said, I work for the Department of the Air Force. It appears that with the present administration, we, Christians, will not be discriminated against as we were in the past. Do you foresee any changes coming that you can share? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, the one thing I could tell you is that when they talk about the discrimination, the era of the President Obama, where it comes to chaplains and chaplaincy and faith in the military, actually uprooted those that were evangelical chaplains and those who were faith sharing, and created massive re-education programs and sensitivity to Muslims and Islam, which is fine if you're going to allow freedom for Christianity. What's happening now is a change, but remember this: the military is more political than you think. And the higher up you go in the generalships, the more they're looking at who's in the administration, and they have career interests. Donald Trump in office is going to change the culture of the military, and it will be more and more embracing of faith and the honoring of Christians in military service. The longer he's in power, it recalibrates Pentagon.
Well, we had a situation right here in Colorado Springs where somebody just posted a scripture on a Post-it note on their locker and got disciplined for it and kicked out of the Air Force Academy. And there was a culture that was against Christians, and Trump has reversed that. I don't know that any of the laws have changed, But I don't think that there were laws against it in the first place. It was just the culture that was created.
It's the culture. And it's just like, why do we have 50% less border penetration without a wall?
That's right.
It's the culture.
Boy, here's a question that feeds something that we needed to talk about. It says, Sid on chat said, Andrew, will there be anyone who can help us organize so we're not on our own? Maybe by city. And you were talking about...
Yes, we are. And,
what was that?
And
you've already got something in place on your...
We have, and you want to stay tuned, because in 10 days we're going to be launching a resource for you that'll be available at Truth and Liberty. Get this, we're going to help you network with other believers right in your own city or state so that you're not alone. And we're going to be able to help you find a group or form a group that you can begin to become a micro-influence right there in your own state. When we come together, where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there is Jesus in the midst of them. And within 10 days, we'll have that ready.
Man, that's awesome right there. We're going to have a lot of things. We're going to have places where if we don't have it on our website, we are going to have links to other people. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't need anything else to do, but I feel a call from God to make this a site that will help draw people together so that we can do things collectively.
And Andrew, and I missed something earlier, and I almost can feel my office saying, don't forget this. I did training on how the left discipled America in the last decade. And I got this from Tom DeLay, Bob McCune, and some guys in Washington. I was shocked, because our call is to disciple nations. And I explain it, and I want to make it available to everybody that wants to be part of this movement. And it's at lancewallnau.com/free gift. 2 hours with, I believe we have like PowerPoints and illustration as to how the left mobilizes and penetrates academia and media and Hollywood and government in order to shift public opinion in favor of the direction they want to take values. But you need to know how it works, because once you see it, you become able to detect what's going on. And this is in every nation. What's happening in America is also happening in Israel. With Netanyahu right now is under the same pressure with media and the left and scandals. They're trying to find something. Same thing is in Australia, and the same thing is now in Europe and in Eastern Europe, where you have people. So you need to look at how this works in the United States, because you'll see it in your own nation.
And we've got people watching in Australia, New Zealand, all kinds of places, but this is not just an American issue.
It isn't an American thing. You'll see it, you'll see the pattern in your own country.
This is actually the spirit of Antichrist that we're fighting against, and it'll go against morality in any nation. Here's another question, and this leads to another thing we need to mention. It says, there are so many liars in politics. How do we know who is truly trustworthy when voting? Will the Truth and Liberty website help with this?
Well, it's interesting, and I think it's important for us to say this, that Andrew and I were talking earlier. I was sharing about certain Democrat candidates that are pro-life, pro-marriage, and I said, now, if I was in their area, I'd be in their corner. So we're not even talking about parties. We're talking about government and the kingdom.
We've got a mayor right here in Woodland Park who's a Democrat, and we might not agree on a lot of things, but we become friends. Matter of fact, he just called us this week, and the school had a suicide, and they've asked Tony Dungy, who's going to be here, and because his son had committed suicide, and he speaks about this, they asked him to hold an assembly for the high school here. And this man, even though he's a Democrat, we disagree on stuff. I guarantee, I don't live in Woodland Park, but if I did, I'd be voting for him.
Right.
This isn't a republic. It's moral versus immoral, and if the Democrats ever get to where they reject their immoral platform, I'd be a Democrat. I'm just for morality is what I'm for.
That's profoundly true. So that everybody knows this. This is an important point, I think, in our worldview, how we approach this. That we're looking for believers that can actually shape culture, and that means that there are believers that are Democrats, believers that are Republican. But in terms of exposing those that are fallacious or wrong, we're going to be as courageous as is possible to be without being needlessly provocative.
Lance, we're already kind of over what we had planned on, but again, this is very preliminary. This is the very first time we've ever rolled this out. But Lance, I believe that this website, as it develops, and again, we need your participation. We can't do this by ourselves. It's called a coalition, and we spent a lot of time coming up with the name. And we did this specifically because this isn't going to be an Andrew Wommack or a Lance Wallnau or any one individual. We are going to try and draw people together. We are going to have this website to where you can go there, and if we don't have the information, we will have links to other places that have already specialized in this, and all of the voting records.
David Barton and various others are going to be working,
Absolutely.
Content will be with all of us.
And so I really see that this is going to be a major influence. I think that this could make a difference in our culture, which is what God's called us to do.
It's truth and liberty, and those two have to be in balance.
But we need you to be a part of it. And so again, I'd encourage you to go to truthandliberty.net. Remember that if you'll sign up, give us your email address, we're going to be sending things to you as the website begins to develop and as things come out. But already you can get this Treasury report that, man, is great news. The largest tax receipts in history for the month of January, the very first month of the tax cuts. You've got 5 pages worth of positive things that have happened in this nation over the last year. And I tell you, you need some good news. This would be good. Those things are already on there, and then we're going to be sending you a lot more information. Remember that eventually we are going to start charging a subscription for these things, but right now we're just trying to get it going.
Get it while it's all free.
We need you to be a part of it. You can go there and sample it, truthandliberty.net. And you would be blessed to be a part of it.
Now, how do we know who the winner is of the large volume of Proverbs you have?
Well, you know what? We don't pull a name out of a hat. It's not a raffle. We just bless someone.
Oh, it's a random drive-by fruiting?
That's right. Drive-by fruiting. I like that. But it's better than just doing a raffle or something. We just choose to bless one person. One person with an 813-page book and another one with a 147-page book.
Yes, which together makes 1,000 pages of stuff.
Oh, here's something else that I forgot to mention. Before we leave, let me mention this, that right now, every 2 weeks, we are planning on having a live stream similar to this for around 45 minutes or something like that, where we start talking about current events. One of the things we wanted to cover tonight was to talk about Billy Graham and to mention that.
Oh, how could we forget?
We wanted to mention Joy Behar, or however you pronounce her name.
The View.
And you've got to give this quote, because she, can you quote what she said about?
Well, she was talking about Vice President Mike Pence. And what she said was that, where is that quote? She said basically that anybody who thinks that they're hearing God, we call it crazy.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus, but to say that Jesus talks to you means you're insane.
Right, basically is a definition of being crazy. Which is, as is happening so often, it's hilarious, because the day after that, the front page of the major liberal media said Oprah is praying and says if God tells her, she'll run for president.
So if she hears from God, that'll make her legally
certifiably crazy, according to The View, anyway.
Anyway, we want to put out things like this. So every other week, we are going to be having Lance, myself, also David Barton, Randy Forbes, others. We're going to be doing a live broadcast like this where we just deal with current events and try and put it into a godly context. And I think that is going to be tremendous. It'll be something that
it is. And all right, we're just 3 minutes over, but listen, it's Facebook. My group's watching this. I just got to share this one thing. We were talking about Billy Graham. Billy Graham, I was here at Karis teaching when he passed away, because I remember I told the students there, and it was a gasp, because I just found out, and so they just found out. And I said, but you know what? I think that Billy Graham, people misunderstand, he wasn't just an evangelist, he was an evangelist statesman. He met with more heads of state than any ministry historically. And I believe that as he has gone up, there's something coming down on a new generation of believers who will be statesmen evangelists. We're going to influence governments and systems. And I really felt that for Karis, and I felt it for the students. And then somebody called me up and said, are you aware of the fact that Billy Graham is right now in the Capitol Rotunda, one of, as you pointed out, 4 Americans that have ever been laid in state.
It's actually in honor, not in state.
Oh,
That's
lay in
for
honor.
Politicians.
Oh, politicians? Okay, lay in honor. Thank you for that distinction.
Okay.
So he's laid in honor in the Capitol there. And then he pointed out to me, he said, and when is it happening? It's happening during the Feast of Purim. And I haven't heard anyone talk about this. Billy Graham, the statesman evangelist, is in the Capitol, lying in honor, President goes up, touches his casket 5 times, and delivers this proclamation. May God raise up among men and women in this country a new generation like Billy Graham that will preach the gospel. And what was Purim? It was the feast where God empowered his people with Esther, who had suddenly emerged in government as an influence, where God empowered his people to protect their identity and their freedom from the attack of the Antichrist spirit. God is saying right now that in this period of time, there is a grace on America for Christians to defend and protect the inheritance that God's given America from the Antichrist spirit. God's not going to do it for us. Everyone was allowed to arm themselves. We're armed with the truth.
And did you know also that during that Rotunda service that President Trump gave the history that I think it was Fred Graham, Billy's father, who gathered some people together on his farm and prayed that God would raise up a mouthpiece to call this nation back to prayer. And that was when Billy Graham was 15 years old, and he didn't know it, but his son was the answer to that prayer. So here he is, Graham, praying that God would raise up somebody. I believe that we are the ones. I believe that this Truth and Liberty Coalition is just a part of it, and we want you to be a part of it. So man, I hope that you join with us. Again, there is no agenda in this other than the fact that God has touched our hearts and we can do more together than we can do separately. And we are trying to draw Christians together all over the world. So thank you for being with us tonight. And Lance, thank you for being a part of this.
Andrew.
And I guarantee you, Lance and I are both busier than any one person ought to be. And we got other things to do, but we're doing this because God has spoken to us. And we just pray that you'll be a part of this. It'll make a difference. So right now, go to truthandliberty.net, sign up for either this good 813-page book or this
Revelatory, 150 pages.
And we will be giving one to somebody. Plus, you can go to Lance's website and get that 2-hour teaching that he was talking about. And that would be a blessing. So thank you for being with us. God bless you, and thank you for being a part of Truth and Liberty.